Good afternoon, learners. Welcome back to Hospitality Studies. My name is Mpume Zulu, and today's lesson is on choux pastry. Choux pastry is a light pastry that consists of butter, water, flour, and eggs, with this main raising agent being steam. Like every food commodity, we have to look at its nutritional value. Choux pastry's main nutrients are carbohydrates and fats, and depending on its filling, proteins as well. Let us look at the ingredients and functions used in choux pastry. You have water, which converts to steam and acts as a raising agent. Now, the ratio of water to shortening is 2:1. Shortening adds flavor and texture and makes the pastry to be elastic and prevents any lumps when you've added your cake flour. The salt adds flavor. The cake flour ensures that it has a fine texture and also develops the gluten as well as the elasticity. The ratio of flour to water is 2 parts flour and 2 parts water. The eggs coagulates during baking. It stabilizes the walls of the cavity as well as emulsifies the butter and the water. Now, boys and girls, it would be fun if you could try this recipe and make choux pastry while you are at home. Now, I'm going to take you through the techniques and show you illustrations of what each step will look like. The first step is that you need to melt your butter into your boiling water. Once it is melted, you add all your flour at once and you stir until it forms a smooth ball and moves away from the sides of the saucepan. You will then set the mixture aside to cool. Once the mixture is cooled, you will then add the eggs one by one. The reason why you add your eggs one by one is that you want a dough that is of a dropping consistency and not for it to be runny. Now, the number of eggs that you add will be determined by the size of the egg and how thick your dough is. Because essentially in the end, you want a smooth, you want a pliable as well as a shiny dough. You will then shape using 2 spoons or pipe using a piping bag onto your baking tray, or if you are frying them, you'll fry them into the oil. You need to make sure that you leave enough space in between, because what will essentially happen is that it will rise and become double its size in the oven. You will then bake in the middle part of your oven immediately. There are 2 cooking methods that you can apply when you are making choux pastry. You can bake it in the oven, where you will start off at a high temperature at approximately 200 degrees Celsius, and other textbooks say 220 degrees Celsius. At this stage, you are developing the steam. After 10 minutes, you will then lower the temperature to 180 degrees Celsius, and the reason for this is that you need to finish and cook off the choux pastry. Another cooking method that you can apply to choux pastry is frying, where you deep fry in hot oil of between 180 degrees Celsius to 190 degrees Celsius. You can either pipe the choux pastry dough or you can spoon it into the oil. Factors to ensure a successful product. It is important that you adhere to the rules of making choux pastry so that your product is always successful. You need to, number one, ensure that you do not boil your water and shortening for too long, because if you do that, the water will evaporate. You will have little steam that is formed, so you will have no cavity, as well as you'll have a very small choux pastry puff. The fat will also ooze out of the final product and you'll have a very oily puff. Flour gelatinizes when cooked with water and butter. You cannot add more flour after the second stage. So after you've added your flour into your water and your butter, you cannot add any more flour, because then you will have an ungelatinized starch which will cause the puff to collapse and you'll have no cavity. Now you might be asking yourself, what is gelatinization? Now, gelatinization is when the starch granules, they absorb the water, they swell because it's more like cooking it, and they swell in the water. Then the eggs must be added one by one until the batter is thick, it is smooth and shiny. This is because if you add too little eggs, you will have a puff that has a small volume and has a small cavity. Now, it is important that you do not have a small cavity because you need to add a filling inside. Now, if you have a small cavity, that means you will not have enough mixture to add in there. But if you put too much eggs as well, it is also not good because the pastry will be runny or the dough will be runny and it cannot be shaped properly. It will actually more like spread onto your baking sheet, and if you're adding it into the oil, you will have like little drops which will be undesirable. You need to bake initially at a high temperature for a short time. The reason for this is that the steam develops at this stage, and that's when the cavity is formed. Thereafter, the temperature is reduced so that the baking time can be completed. And the reason for this is that the pastry dries out and completes it to ensure that in the end you have a delicate, you have a crispy shell, and it also does not burn. Because if you leave the pastry at that high temperature, at that 200 or that 220 degrees, you will burn it, and then your dough or your choux pastry product will be undercooked, and then it will become very oily. You need to have a knife or a testing pin that you pierce each puff with so that the steam escapes. Then you return the puffs back into the oven so that now the cavity that has been formed during steaming dries out. If you do not pierce and release that steam, the result will be puffs that are very soft and they'll actually collapse. Problems that occur while you are preparing and baking the choux pastry products. You can have puffs that are not aerated, which means they have not puffed up, they won't be hollow, they'll be soft and they'll collapse. And the reason for that is that the mixture was too soft. You've added too many eggs, so it's not a nice consistency. It hasn't been pliable, so it becomes soft and it won't puff up. The oven was too cold. Okay, you need to make sure that you preheat your oven before you add your pastry dough so that it does become aerated. You do have that hollow, you do have that crispy shell, and it does become golden brown. If your oven's too cold, then you will not have those features. You will also have a result of the pastry being undercooked. The puffs can be greasy and heavy. That is because the mixture was overcooked, so you've extended the cooking time, the baking time. The oven was not hot enough, you did not preheat that oven, and then you've added too much shortening. Now remember, in the first stage I said that you add 2 parts water and 1 part shortening. So if you add too much shortening, you will have a very greasy and a very heavy puff that will not have that hollow center. The puffs did not rise. That is because the batter was too soft and you've used too many eggs. The puffs had a small volume but had a very thick crust. That is because too little steam was generated. Okay, that could be a result of maybe starting it off at 180 degrees instead of 200 degrees. Remember, we said we started off at a higher temperature for 10 minutes and then you lower the temperature because you need to develop the steam at the high temperature. So that was not done, and that will result in a small volume. The dough was also very thick, so it won't form, the steam formation won't happen, it won't form the hollowness inside, so it will become very thick and very dense. Essentially, you want the following characteristics when you've fully cooked, or you fully fried or baked your choux pastry product. You want it to be crispy on the outside, you want it to be hollow inside, and you want it to be dry. You don't want it to be clucky and thick. You want it to be light in weight because it is hollow. You want it to be light brown in color. Now be mindful here, boys and girls, it's either you write light brown or golden brown, and not just write light or write just brown. It must be light brown or golden brown. It must have an even size. It must have a dry center when broken open, which is the same as being hollow and dry. The following products can be attained from choux pastry. Okay, the following are all baked in the oven. The first one is our eclairs. These are basically our long fingers that have got a filling of a creme pâtissière. A creme pâtissière is a custard that is made out of egg yolks, milk, and sugar, and thickened with the cornstarch. You can also fill it with chantilly cream. This is your cream that is sweetened with sugar, and then at the top it has a chocolate coating, melted chocolate coating. You have your cream puffs. These are 2 to 4 centimeter buns that are also filled with the creme pâtissière, or they can also be filled with the chantilly cream, and they are dusted with icing sugar. You've got your croquembouche. This is a pyramid French cake. Okay, these are basically our choux pastry buns that have been stuck together with caramel. They've been filled with cream, and then they've got spun sugar that is used as a decoration. You've got your swans, so you shape your choux pastry into swans and you fill it up with your chantilly cream. You've got your profiteroles, still your buns that are filled with cream. They can be filled with ice cream as well, and then they are glazed with your melted chocolate. Then you've got your Paris breast. This is a choux pastry ring that has slivers of almonds that are scattered at the top. It is then baked and then filled with the praline cream, and then dusted with icing sugar. You've got your Gâteau Saint Honoria. This is quite interesting. It's got a base of puff pastry, and then you've got your choux pastry balls that are filled with cream, and then they're also glazed with your caramel sauce, and you've got your cream in the center. Then you've got your gagreux. These are choux pastry that have a filling or that are mixed with some cheese. So this will be your savory part of your choux pastry. You can also have another component or another savory choux pastry product where you fill it with your tuna mayonnaise or your chicken mayonnaise or ham, that can form part of your savory. Now for your fried choux pastry product, the first one is your churros. These are long fingers that are piped into oil, and then once they're taken out, they are dusted with cinnamon and sugar. Then your baguette, it is squares or strips of choux pastry that are also fried, and they are dusted with icing sugar. You also have your pommes dauphine. These are your choux pastry. It is a choux pastry that has been mixed with some mashed potatoes and fried. Learners, you can present your choux pastry products where you use a sharp knife that you make an incision, as you can see on the picture here. You make an incision at the bottom. If it's the eclairs, you obviously cut them on in the or sideways so you can open them up. You can either spoon your filling, or else you can pipe it and then inside. Then your sweet fillings, we've spoken about them. It is your whipped cream, or which is sometimes called a chantilly cream. This is basically your cream again that has been sweetened with sugar. Your creme pâtissière, we said it's just your custard that is made out of egg yolks, your milk, your sugar, and then it is thickened with your cornstarch. You can fill it with ice cream, with jam, with caramel, drained canned fruit. You can also have savory fillings where you can fill it with the bechamel sauce. This is your white sauce. You can add some tuna mayonnaise. You can add some cream cheese and chives. You can add some salmon. You can add basically about anything that will be quite a thick consistency, because you don't want it to ooze out of the cavity as well, because then it will make your choux pastry to be too soft, and also your presentation won't be good. To glaze the top or ice the top, you can use vanilla or chocolate icing. You can dust it with icing sugar. You can have a hot chocolate sauce. You can melt chocolate. You can add fondant, or you can add spun sugar. Okay. How can choux pastry be stored and which temperature? Now, this is quite an important question. You can either store them in the fridge for 12 hours if they are unbaked and they are unshaped. So once you've completed adding the eggs and the mixture is now smooth, it's shiny and it's pliable, then you can put it in the fridge for 12 hours and then you can use it thereafter, whether you want it to bake or you want to fry it. Or unbaked, but you've shaped it. Let's say, for example, you were going to make your eclairs, so you've made your fingers onto your baking tray. You can take the baking tray uncovered, you place it in the freezer, and then once it becomes a solid, you remove it from the freezer, you cover it up with your cling film, and then you can freeze it for 3 months. You can also store it if you've baked it, but you have unfilled it. So you have not put any cream in there, you have not put any custard in there, you have not put any savory fillings. You can place it in an airtight container and you can keep it for 3 days. Or you can also keep it for months if you freeze it, but it mustn't be filled. Once you've filled the choux pastry, whether with your sweet or your savory filling, it has got a limited shelf life. Even though you can put it in the fridge, but it'll become soggy and the cream will start to separate, and indeed it won't essentially look nice, nor will it taste nice. And then also the chocolate, if you've got the chocolate glaze on top, it'll start to break and become smooth. Okay, that's the end of our lesson. Let us now look at how this section can be tested. Now, it's quite a short section, as you've gathered now, so it will not have more than 8 marks in a question paper. Okay, let's look at the first question. It says, name and describe 2 sweet baked products made with choux pastry which will be suitable to serve at a cocktail function. Now, our action verb here is to name, so you must give the name. You must then have a second action verb which says describe, so they want you to name and describe 2 sweet. Okay, then the biggest key word here is to serve at a cocktail function. So you must be mindful that it can't be all of those products that I've discussed, okay, that can now be part of your responses here. It must be 2, it must be sweet, it must be baked, and it must be small, because it must be served at a cocktail function. Now let us look at the answers. You can have your cream puffs, so you'll get 1 mark for saying cream puffs, but remember you must now describe it. The reason why you choose cream puffs is because they are balls of 2 to 4 centimeters. They are filled with pastry cream or with chantilly cream. Your profiteroles can also be part of a cocktail function. They are also baked. They can also be sweet because you can fill them up with pastry cream or chantilly cream. Your eclairs can also be part of your response because they are log or they finger shaped, and they can be filled with chantilly cream and topped with chocolates, which makes them sweet. You've got your croquembouche, which is a pyramid of filled cream puffs covered with spun sugar, because they are suitable for a cocktail function because each guest will pick up the little buns. So it makes it suitable. As a whole, it's quite big because we said that it is like a wedding cake, but because it's filled with small balls or small cream puffs, it makes it suitable for the cocktail function. Your swans, if you make them to be very small, are suitable because they're also filled with chantilly cream. Your bagnettes, which are now which will not be the correct answer. Sorry, I forgot to remove that because now these are fried. You can have a mini Paris breast, which is a choux pastry packed into small rings, and it is topped with your slivered almonds. Okay, so 2 marks for identifying the product and then 2 marks for giving the description. Okay, the next question, boys and girls, says, name the pyramid-shaped product that is made by stacking the cream puffs using caramel. The answer is a croquembouche. Remember, it's a French wedding cake. It is shaped like a pyramid. It is stacked, and then the little buns are stuck with caramel. The next question says justify, action verb justify, which means give a reason why the spun sugar used to decorate the product named in question B should be prepared on the same day it is used. So let us go back, boys and girls. We said that the answer was a croquembouche, and then I've reminded you that a croquembouche is our French wedding cake that has got the choux pastry puffs that are binded or stuck together using caramel, and it is decorated with spun sugar. So now they're asking you now about that last layer or that last part of your croquembouche. Why must that spun sugar be prepared on the same day? And the same day you need to use it. It is because the caramel will absorb the moisture, it will become too soft, and it will not hold its shape. Okay. Our next question, identify the picture above, and the question then reads, name a choux pastry product or name the choux pastry product above. So you need to identify this very easy, straightforward question, and that is an eclair, or you can say chocolate eclair. You will not be penalized for saying that. Still on that same picture of an eclair, the question reads now, identify the raising agent used in the choux pastry product. And the answer is steam. Remember, with choux pastry, the raising agent is steam. The next question, boys and girls, describe 3 quality characteristics of the choux pastry product. Remember, you've got about 6, so if you can memorize 3 to 4, you would be just fine. It needs to be crisp, it needs to be hollow, or you can say well puffed. It needs to be dry inside, light in weight, it needs to be light brown in color or light or golden brown in color. It needs to be evenly sized or a similar size. And you need to only mention 3 in your responses for you to be awarded the 3 marks. The next one, boys and girls, reads, give 1 reason for each of the following when preparing choux pastry products. So they're going to pose you with steps in making choux pastry products, and you need to give a reason why those steps are adhered to. The first one says, do not boil the water in the shortening too long, and we've discussed that in the factors to ensure a quality product. And the answer there is you need to prevent evaporation that will result in too little steam, or it will change the ratio of the ingredients. You will have a smaller volume if there has been evaporation. It will prevent it from rising, and then that will essentially result in an oily product. So any one of those will be fine. Next one, why must you bake the choux pastry at a high temperature for a short period. Now you must be mindful here, they did not give you the temperatures, so it is quite it's not an easy question, but the key word here is high. So you know that you started off at a high temperature, and then you lower it to a lower temperature. The reason why you started at a high temperature, it allows for enough steam in order to allow the dough to rise or to form a hollow or to form a cavity. And then the next question, why do you reduce the temperature after a few minutes? And the reason is to ensure that the pastry dries out completely, that it is well cooked, for it to keep its shape, and also most importantly to prevent burning. Now that is the end of our lesson, learners. I hope you have learned a lot once again. I will be uploading more activities for you pertaining to choux pastry, and they will be found on our Eastern Cape curriculum.co.za page, where you can engage more with this topic. I hope you've learned a lot, and I will see you for our next lesson.